I want to see what you think of this, because as I was watching this game, considering the evolution of the sport and modern basketball, you wouldn't have thought this with a team like OKC, didn't have a lot of profile coming into the season, and the Indiana Pacers, who are a 4 seed. I thought that this game might have been some of the highest level of basketball that's ever been played.
It's interesting. I think that you kind of have to filter through. I mean, this was a game that had 71 free throws. It took almost 3 hours to play, but there was a lot of, and I'll talk about the Pacers' fourth quarter, but I do think that there was a lot of really good stuff here in terms of how the teams were playing, how the ball was moving in its best moments. I think I hadn't thought of it that way. That wasn't something that struck me during it, but I understand where you're coming from.
Well, so I guess I can elaborate on that. I think just in terms of how hard both teams played over a 48-minute game, and just how unbelievably connected these teams were defensively, how hard it was for even really good players, really good offenses to get a shot, to get the ball. And there were a lot of fouls that were called, although interestingly, there were no challenges taken in the game. And I would think that would probably be your biggest criticism, is that there were just some unnecessary fouls and mistakes, particularly down the end. Like I think as I rewatched it, I was like, yeah, that's probably not true for the Indiana Pacers in the last
Right.
3-4 minutes of this game, because they did make a lot of mistakes. But just in terms of like through the meat of the game, the level of intensity, how locked in you had to be mentally and physically, and how any kind of a mistake by either team on either end was just instantly punished.
Well,
And everyone was so connected. Like, that's what stood out to me.
And on top of that, so I think that's a really interesting point. And on top of that, one of the ways that this game was different than a lot of what we see normally in NBA basketball is that even you had to work to punish the mistakes, because, like,
Yeah.
for example, the Indiana Pacers weren't able to really score off of the steals they generated because the Thunder were getting back. They also missed some of those shots. And so you lose that too, where it's like, oh, even the pick sixes, those weren't really there to any degree. And so I had a note in my stuff similar to something you said, and I really like the way that you phrased that in terms of like execution and defense, because I thought that a lot of the point that you're making was how hard the defenses were making the offenses work, and that's something that doesn't always get appreciated, sometimes by us, but also by everyone in general. Like it's a hard thing to really kind of sit there and take in. But I had this moment in the first half where I'm just like, Jesus, all these shots are hard. Like nobody's getting
Yeah.
anything really clean. And that is so, and I think at times in the Pacers' late game offense, it was bad offense, but a lot of the time it was really good connectedness on defense. The consistency of effort in this game was fabulous. Like you didn't see guys taking even parts of plays off. Like that sort of stuff was fabulous.
Yeah. I guess maybe another way to think about it is like, all right, the Thunder were 3 of 17 from 3, right? And they won the game. So how can you say that, this is some of the highest level of basketball? But I was just in thinking about it in terms of like how many other teams that we've seen would have come in and been able to play at a high enough level to beat either of these teams tonight. That's kind of more at the level that I was thinking about it, because like these teams might be the two hardest teams to play against in NBA history in terms of just the level of minute to minute intensity that they are bringing, and the level of minute to minute being locked in on the game plan on both sides of the floor. And, so yeah, like the 2017 Warriors probably come in and beat these teams, you would think. But would they, just if they stepped on the floor tomorrow with 8 years of evolution of strategy? I mean, they're more talented, certainly, but like, is that team only had 7 players probably that were really good, right? So like, I think there's a question about, because these teams have outlasted other really good teams, Pacers more so than the Thunder. But anyway, that's probably enough on that. I just think it's an interesting thing to think about, because it didn't look pretty, but it's also like these teams are both just such bears to play against, and they're such bears to play against when they go up against each other as well.
Well, I'll make one more point on that. I'm
Yeah.
really interested, and we won't get an answer on this playoffs. what if it carries forward?
Yeah.
Are the way that these teams play in terms of how other teams play and in terms of how these teams advance. Now, the Thunder are talented enough that they could do that. The Pacers are very talented too, and we're going to see a different East. So I want to see if the pain in the ass to play against is how strong a predictive factor that is. And I think the place, unless you have a clear-cut place to start, and of course you can intervene, I think for me, the first thing that was striking about this game, like in terms of everything, was that yes, the Thunder won it, and yes, the Thunder won it despite missing a billion jump shots. But I honestly thought through most of the game that it wasn't the Thunder flipping a switch, the Thunder solving the Pacers.